So Jesus says that if you can see him in a stranger, then you can see him. And if you can't see him in a stranger, that you can't see him. He says that while he may be a full and whole human being himself, one we often call the ideal human, how could Jesus be any more or less complete? But he actually says in this first text that we read that he's not complete, that he's half, that he's less, that he needs to be part of the stranger and the other to be fully himself and fully seen and fully recognized. Then we get to that Pentecost text, which kind of says the same thing. It says the same thing in that it argues that we are capable of understanding each other's languages, even though we think we're not. And that when the Spirit fully arrives among us, we will be so filled with the Spirit that I'll actually understand what my husband is saying, or my enemy is saying, or the person I just don't get. I'll understand what he or she is saying. It will be in a very different language, but I'll get it. I will be completed when the Spirit fully comes. Even as Jesus says, he will be complete when you and I see someone hungry or alone or wandering in him. Today, in Joys and Concerns, you're going to meet a woman named Myrna. And she is going to speak in her own, we think she's not here yet, but we anticipate that she will be, and we'll figure it out one way or the other. We hope you will meet Myrna. And she's going to speak in her native Spanish. And only those of you who speak a couple of languages will probably understand her. And that will be on purpose, in order for her to experience with us Pentecost. The United States government deported Myrna 3 years ago. And 2 weeks ago, some of you know the story, she walked across the border from Mexico into the United States without being held up or held back. Juan Carlos Ruiz of the New Sanctuary Movement met her with her 2 daughters who had been without their mother on behalf of the United States government for 3 years. The girls are 14 and 8. My little role was to be on the phone with the ICE officer as this drama was unfolding and to beg him to pray with me that he would let her go. And we knew he was going to. We were just giving him a little support. If we are lucky, and if Myrna is lucky, she will become someone who gets asylum in the United States of America. Myrna is the good news. And you know, for every 1,000 or million refugees, asylum is real. But the other 999 are with Jesus too. But they are not the companion to the successful Jesus, the one whose victories are few and far between, as we all know. Just look at that front page of your bulletin, and I'm sure you've seen those pictures in better form before. But as NPR said yesterday when it was telling us yet another story about yet another Syrian refugee, this story could be front page news every day, but we've run out of people to showcase because it's the same exact story. People fleeing a civil war, no political recourse in sight, in boats that don't fit them, with their own children falling over into the sea and drowning before their very eyes. We all know the story, and we know that it's true. And that's why we see Jesus in drowning children and in successful walks across the border. That's why we have Good Friday and Easter both. And I'm glad I don't have to hire Jesus as a staff member around here, she said pompously, because his failure rate is really serious. His failure rate is really serious. Before I get to some more bad news, let me tell you my favorite refugee story. It comes from Sarajevo. Remember Sarajevo? Same story, different country. One of the women who walked out of her native land during that human rights crisis took with her in her small suitcase her Sabbath candles and a lace tablecloth. And her son, who was 11 at the time, walked with her in the long lines, carrying the suitcase. And he kept saying, "Why? What about food? What about money?" And she said, "No, we will exchange the Sabbath with people every night, and they will give us some of their food because we have the candles and the tablecloth." And that's exactly what happened. They ate very well on the road. The tablecloth got dirty. It got lost. There were no more candles. But they would set up the rags and say thank you for what they did not have, giving us another version of Jesus showing up on the road. So, today I want to do a little bit of word study with you, and I've already mentioned Warren once today. He's at his graduation at the University of Hartford, but he's one of these people who reads the entire paper every day. And this week, on Wednesday and Thursday, he kept yelling from the living room saying, the word riven, R-I-V-E-N, is back in the paper today. And it was on the front page of the New York Times 4 times on Wednesday. Mugabe's frailty shows and power grab brews. Will it fall apart, riven by infighting? London elects mayor, intense election. Struggling with a rise in Islamophobia, riven by debates about the flood of Syrian immigrants. Riven. The New York Times again. Chicago's survey finds many see city gone awry. The people of Chicago are deeply riven. And finally, 16 clenched fists and a glimpse of a riven West Point, a group of young black women poised to graduate from the U.S. Military Academy, gathered on the West Point's oldest barracks and said that they were riven and were raising their clenched fists. Riven. Probably haven't heard enough of that word for a while. It means to rend or tear apart, to break into pieces as by a blow, to cleave or split asunder, to break or distress. That's what riven means. Until the Spirit fully comes, we will remain riven. Like Jesus, we will only be part of what we are. We'll be half of what we are because we are completed in the stranger. Completed in each other. We are parts. We are split asunder by the absence of Spirit. Did you see that thousands of Syrian refugees who went to Canada and got asylum by that incredible, incredible country were right in the middle of that fire and had to be moved out abruptly? 11,000 Syrian refugees, already homeless, rushed out of Canada. It's so funny the way we talk about them as refugees and other immigrants as undocumented immigrants, especially in this country of pilgrims, where the United Church of Christ can't stop talking about Plymouth this and Plymouth that and Plymouth the other thing, as if we were not immigrants and refugees ourselves in that great place called Jamestown or Plymouth Rock. You see on the front page of your bulletin another story more locally of another kind of immigrant, another economic immigrant. This is the former head of Etsy.com who's moved to Catskill, New York to start a food truck. And he totally failed. Why? Because he wanted to pay a decent wage, source local products, and sell food at a price that the people in Catskill could afford to buy. And he said, oh my God, we put all that money into it and found out it's economically impossible. You can't do that. We advise refugees and immigrants to make the best of it. Come here, invest in a food truck. Make lemonade out of your lemons. And you know what? If the head of Etsy.com can't do it, neither can they. So, someone said that at a party, the most interesting people are in the corners. I think that's true, don't you? The less interesting people have grabbed all the air and are talking loud. But the more interesting people are around and about. What if the meaning of Pentecost was good news? Not that you should do something about immigrants or refugees or resolve the Syrian crisis on your own or even start a food truck, because maybe that's impossible. But what happens when the Spirit fills you up enough that you can't help but notice somebody else? Give them the courtesy of noticing them, and not just when they're on the front page in a beautiful award-winning photograph. But today, as they are trudging from place to place, wondering if anybody gives a damn about them. Could today we wonder if we do give a damn about them? And be pointed to our deeper and higher self-interest, which is, we will not be complete or full until the Spirit fills us. We will not be complete or full until we embrace the corners as well as the mainland and understand what parts of us are refugeed and are on the move. If that was true for Jesus, it has to be true for us too. Amen.